Hello. So Josh here has kindly agreed to answer my questions for this Q&A. So Josh, if you want to just give us a bit about your background, who you are, where you're from, and what you do, that would be great. So take it away.
Yeah, so basically, I started off as an environment artist at Expression, where I was a junior environment artist, and I'm still at Expression, but now a mid-level. Been there almost 3 years. I do have some prior experience freelance. I worked for a studio called Cathedral. They were working on a title. But yeah, I started in Sheffield, went through the normal education routes of college, university, and masters. And the degree for university, they were both at Sheffield Hallam. But essentially, after that, just a lot of personal work, and that is ultimately what kind of got me into the industry.
Great. Okay, so you're well qualified then. Um, okay, so I'm just going to ask you a few questions. I'll start with question one. So what would be some key techniques a recruiter would look for within a junior environment artist portfolio? So, for example, would should we be refining trim sheet work, UV unwrapping, or good texture workflow, or do you have something else entirely in your mind?
I think from my experience, realistically, depending on what you're doing, obviously you've got your stylized and your realism. Realism is, I would say, the stronger thing to go for due to the nature of the UK games industry. Much more favouring that sort of, I guess, workflow and art style when you look at a lot of the job positions. Now, it's really good doing trim sheet work, UV unwrapping, good texturing. I'm not saying it's not needed, but I don't think you need to necessarily show it. It's something that you can explain in your interviews. I think that the key thing is to just have a solid piece of work. I had environment, but I also had prop work, and I think prop work shows that you are a competent modeler. So therefore, you should have good unwrapping skills and texture and workflow, and just modeling capabilities, no matter what the software. So realistically, yes, you should still be doing these processes and methods and workflows, but as long as your work is good and you can explain it, um, then I think that is enough. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a few breakdowns here and there, but I think the end result is good quality work that they can see. You shouldn't have to go through everything. If your work sells it as it is, then obviously it's good enough. That's more optimization with your UV unwrapping, obviously saving space. Trim sheets are really good and still being used. But I think we are seeing a few more things come out, like material layering, and some more technical shader work being done to still get really high fidelity across things. Crucial to know, but yeah, just have solid work and just be sure to explain that you've done these processes in your interviews.
Great. Okay. So going on to question two. So for this one, what would you say some common mistakes in a junior artist portfolio might be?
Um, Publishing or uploading work that's not done. They think it's done, or they finish their uni module or assignment and that's it. It's done, forgotten about, never touched again. Realistically, it's probably not done. There's nothing wrong with finishing work and uploading it, but I would argue the issue with I think university is that you are set to a deadline, and some of that deadline is time being taken up with written work and bits of admin and a bit of planning. I mean, planning's fine, but there's definitely a lot more of that because it's criteria they need to mark, so you kind of lose that time. I think students or people who are graduates or want to get in on the environment through a junior entry is that you kind of need to maybe set yourself no real time deadlines and just hit the target of, is this triple A quality, is this good enough to get a job, because that is realistically the end goal. Deadlines are important in the real world when you're at a studio, when you've got targets, deadlines, etc. But I think before students and graduates worry about them deadlines, you've got to hit that quality bar first. if they're always going to block themselves with, okay, it's done, then that is just going to prevent reaching that kind of bar that they know they need to get to, and then that they can, you know, reproduce that level. So I think that was crucial when I was doing some prop work. I think you need to get that standard and then start doing more deadliney stuff, and then you'll be familiar at how long it does take to get to that quality.
Yeah.
And again, whilst deadlines are important, there's always going to be a few tasks in the real world where you get your tickets slightly extended, or the task was, from producers was seemingly easy, but there's always, sometimes there is a turn of events, or the scope gets pushed out further, or the directors want to push quality here or there a little bit more, and therefore extensions actually do happen, not often, but it is something. If it's important or key to the art direction or visual, especially when it's something where the player might go near or close or interact with, you have to kind of up the quality. So I think, yeah, the time thing, students shouldn't just shut off. I think there's a lot of personal work and deadline stuff they need to kind of softly ignore just to get the quality up, and then worry about deadlines after.
Yeah, that's very interesting to hear. I mean, as I'm a student as well, like it's there's obviously quite personal to me as well. I think all of us do get that burnout mentality of, okay, my project is finished for my deadline at uni, but yeah, maybe it's not as best as it could possibly be. So yeah, that's valuable insight. Thank you. Okay, so number three, what level of technical understanding would be expected from a junior? Is it core fundamental knowledge?
I mean, I suppose for a lot of the things when you're a junior, this can differ from studio to studio and kind of what their progression paths are, or how they kind of structure teams and line managers and, etc. I think core fundamentals, topology optimization, modeling skills, I'd say they're there. They're definitely at like sort of entry level. And you should be good enough to go about doing it without any hand holding, and you'll essentially grow into learning more optimization. Topology, I think this should be that again, that understanding. But depending on if you want to specialize in more hard surface or other stuff, that's where you'll develop, better topology or certain things, processes and workflows. I think there's some other stuff like lighting and material setup where I suppose you could argue it would be someone else's job, but some studios want more of a generalist, and I think this is where it might come down to your research on that studio and job at that place, right?
Yeah,
Some want more generalist, and you might be expected to do material setup, maybe a bit of lighting. But from my experience, lighting is something I've not done. I've done it in my own time, but I've not touched it in this professional capacity. I would say it definitely can't harm, but you should nail the the modeling, a degree of optimization, and then have your own little things that make you stand out. Maybe you don't want to do advanced trim sheets, but you might have a bit of a passion for shaders and materials. You need something, otherwise, you're not going to stand out. But there are these areas will, I guess, grow. Optimization is probably the big one, because you will, from what I've seen, there's always going to be dedicated technical artists, TAs, and that was probably a big area for myself in where you can save cost and understanding stuff. You might know about quad draw or other little things that affect performance, but I can guarantee that you know nothing compared to a TA.
yeah,
Little things like turning off, shadows for this, that might seem really simple, but then you could have H LODs and they're, different to normal LODs, and just having a lot more stuff that is in that tier category that they'll pass down or inform teams, inform your line manager, and then all that information trickles down, and you'll all do this for some blueprints, or you'll all do this for your PLAs, depending on what version of Unreal you're in. And yes, it might seem a bit of a faff here and there for some sort of small savings, but it all matters, and you should like 1,000% listen to it. Especially, I think one of the biggest ones we're seeing in this kind of generation of consoles and gaming is texture memory. Games are looking good with high fidelity, but I think the quality of games are somewhat getting bottlenecked by graphical memory, essentially. So it's very important that you kind of listen to tiers, and you'll get that understanding from them. When working on these more, I'd say double and triple A standard games, if you get into something like a project that big.
Amazing. Yeah, I think my lecturer Ken, who's running this module, will enjoy that because he's a bit of a TA himself, so he'll get some enjoyment out of you saying that. Okay, so I'll go on to the next one. So number 4, can you describe your typical workflow when creating environment assets, and how would a junior's task fit into a wider pipeline?
Okay, so obviously I've had different workflows for environment assets due to different projects and whatnot. But I'd say a good rule is kind of find out what is the prop or asset being used for. Is it close, near player kind of prop? Is it an out of bounds or distance? Mid or far ground kind of prop. But I'd say as a rule of thumb, you'll always get a bit of planning. You'll kind of get a rough timeline and your ticket on whatever sort of software or ticket software you're using. Something like Jira, for example. You'll get your reference. Sometimes they'll give you some. Sometimes you add your own. Sometimes you kind of culminate together. And then if there's any discrepancies, make sure you communicate and talk about it. But I'd say it's mostly a case of block out using ref. You might decide to use an image or an image plane in Blender or Maya, whatever you use, or you might decide to just look at your pure ref or reference boards and just get something blocked out very, very quick. I'd say that's the main thing, just so you can start on A, the model, and B, test it in engine. Does it fit with LD? Have you got metrics to consider? For example, player size, walking in through doorways. Have you got that width? Have you got that height? Does it, is it going to block players? Is it going to block vehicles? That's something that, especially for multiplayer games, is a big consideration. So obviously you'll get that kind of asset blocked out, and you'll just do, like, I suppose, a detail block out. For my general environment asset, it's I guess going to be more of a mid poly sort of asset. They're not hero props or a hero asset that needs a low, high, big. That's obviously seen more in your hard surface, or maybe characters who are doing a custom prop that's attached to that character or whatever. But yeah, it's a lot of, I guess, mid poly. And then just seeing what's it used for. Is it the consideration of is it going to be a modular asset? Check your grid snapping. Are you using a trim sheet? Are you having to do like a baked kind of texture workflow where you're packing it in just like 1-to-1 and doing its own little custom thing in Painter? But this is where it kind of diverges massively. But standard workflow, get your planning, get your ref, model a block out, test it, make sure it matches LD considerations, get it, finish it off in model, unwrap it, texture it, get it in engine, and then just technically set it up, put on your materials, test collisions, add LODs if they need LODs, and then kind of set that kind of stuff. But that that's the pipeline. As a junior, it's pretty much the same. You might have a little bit of hand holding at first. You might struggle with I think some juniors are like, what are lods? And it's good to know them. Some might not. Very very quick to pick up. I think a lot of juniors will know what lods are, and they will know that collision's important, but they probably might not know what the naming convention to set up lods are or to set up collisions. I'm pretty sure I didn't. I just knew they were a thing, but having them little technical things is a quick one, two sentence questions. How do I do this? How do I do that? And very, very quick to learn. And I think that's it. I would just recommend asking when if you get into industry and you're in a junior position, just be a sponge. Ask, ask, ask. People do, you shouldn't be bothered if people are going to get annoyed. People
Yeah.
in this industry generally don't. They're very, very nice, friendly. Um, and then as soon as you've done it once or two times, you'll be completely fine, and you'll be independent, and that's it. You obviously get better and faster and less questions. But yeah, that's pretty much it. The workflow is very similar. You just might have a few, little questions here or there, or maybe one or two sticking points, but it's very, very similar.
Yeah, yes, it's quite similar to like a university workflow. You go from referencing to blocking out to modeling to texturing, unwrapping all that sort of stuff in order. So I'm glad to hear it's fairly similar. Okay, so I'm going to go on to number five. So are there any skills, tools, or workflows that you think juniors should be prioritized learning and refining now?
Okay, that is a big question. I think this massively comes down to where you're going, but also what you care about. I think I'm still in that kind of weird, what kind of thing do I like?
Yeah,
I think I'm in that prop slash environment. I like both, and then I'll also like hard surface. So you might not know straight away what you want to do, but pursue them. Pursue what you actually want to do. Um, but I think skills, tools, or workflows, you are going to have different ones. If you want to do more hard surface, then nail your kind of hard surface tools, Boolean cutting, potentially ZBrush. Look at all the new workflows that studios are doing around guns, hard surface, and the Boolean process, especially where Booleans and remesh is being used. Um, I personally have been using Blender for the past year, and I think that's wicked.
yeah,
I'm not, your software is a tool, and you should be able to use any tool. None are technically superior. It's about how you use it. But I would say Blender is really, really strong for anyone wanting to get into a remesh workflow, hard surface, and modifiers. 3ds Max is also very good, so I do think they're pretty sweet. You might be someone who wants to pursue some funky landscape stuff, so you might want to use Gaia. I might be butchering how to pronounce that, but that's like a terrain node based generator. That's very cool. And yeah, I mean, as a junior, just pursue, I guess, your areas of expertise.
yeah,
It's very handy if you obviously know Unreal 4 or 5, maybe both. 5 becoming probably the norm. So you really should get to know that. I imagine you will be knowing them if you're an environment artist. But yeah, really kind of just nail one of them. Because if you know 4 or 5, it's fairly transferable set of skills. 5's just got a few more flashy, cool things. But knowing 4 wouldn't hurt 5. So that's not a problem. Workflows, I think, just kind of do what you kind of do in uni, but um, push that further with personal learning. And I think what you'll do in a junior job, or when you get to a studio, sometimes you'll document things, not quite the same as uni, but you'll make reproducible steps. If you do something cool or you don't want the knowledge to get lost, it might be worth showing that you understand a workflow that you've created. And even if it's not 1,000% right, you can still write it up, or we post it on our internal documentation stuff. and someone might add to it. That's fine. It's not saying that you're wrong, but someone might be like, "Oh, you can do this," so the knowledge just gets better and better. So I think that's a good workflow. Tools and software, do your own kind of thing. Just make sure you nail Unreal, and you're, I think, a decent modeler to a degree. You need to kind of be the Swiss Army knife, I think, for modern environment positions, because I think environment artists now are expected to do environment props, and be maybe a little bit more generalist than
Mhm.
5-10 years ago. Only because we're not seeing, or at least I'm not seeing, as many specific prop jobs. You'll still have your hard surface, gun modelers. That is a very specific role, but I think environment artists should know how to prop model, definitely. So, make sure you've got your Unreal knowledge and make sure you know how to model. Don't just rely on Unreal, because then you will, I think, get kind of shoeboxed into just being an engine artist or set dressing. That might not be for you, and it also might not be what the company wants. You need a little bit of versatility.
Okay.
Skills, just make sure you've got your technical skills, but your soft skills, communication. Um, there are obviously people who are really, really good at the job, but don't get hired because they struggle with socializing,
Mhm.
communicating. They are just as important. Yes, it won't be the first thing they'll notice if your soft skills aren't up to scratch, but they will notice in your second or third interview. So just make sure you're at least somewhat confident, because it will be looked at, I'd say, in down the line in the recruiting process.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that kind of a lot of jobs take into consideration, don't they? Like, because you're going to be working either in a small team or with a team with a lot of people. You're all going to have like a lot of face time with each other. You want to be able to get on with somebody, for sure. Um, so number six, what helped you personally get your first role in the industry?
So for me, it was, I guess, some of the advice I gave earlier, but I just give myself um, a project, a personal project, and then I didn't give myself a deadline at all. It was do this till it's done.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time. I'm not even mad about it, but I spent a lot of time on, I think it was the screwdriver at first. Yes, it was a screwdriver. And then luckily, just because it was good enough, I guess, I got the article with 80 level. I obviously applied for an environment position at Expression, and one of the talking points was the screwdriver. And I explained, I was honest. I said I didn't give myself a deadline. I didn't say, oh, I did this and lied, and I did this in 1 or 2 weeks. I went, no, my entire purpose was to make it, I guess, hyper realistic or just super realistic. And they absolutely agreed that it was, fantastic. And I think from one of the guys in the interview, they were like, "Wow, yeah, you got the 80 level. That's really cool." I think I mentioned, feel free to have a look at it, and they were like, "Yeah, they definitely will." So whilst I think my portfolio was good, I don't think it was the strongest portfolio in the world. It definitely wasn't. But because that screwdriver was so recent and showed I was still doing stuff after uni, and I'd got an article, and it was, really good quality, and that, they had obviously commented on that as well. I think that was it. They still ask questions like, in the other pieces of work, that were good, but obviously not as good as a screwdriver. Stuff like, so what kind of techniques did you use in this? And I think soft skills, my communication and interview was, I think, spot on. I could, clearly say I did this, I did that, I understood this, I showed my knowledge, I shared stuff, I talked about, the technicalities and how I did things, and just obviously showed my understanding of what I did, how I went through things, workflows, and yeah, I think I answered succinctly, and it covered everything. That they didn't even have to ask any more questions. They were fairly happy with that. So I think, again, soft skills, I showed technical capability and some decent high, fidelity work that was recent and published as an article. That was it. It was in the bag.
Yeah, that's some really good exposure, isn't it? Getting your work published in an article, that all to can see, how good you are as an artist. Okay, so my final question, Josh. So how much collaboration is generally involved in your role? What does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit. It does depend on the task you're doing, but daily there's communication. Um, I'm sure it changes at every studio, but I've pretty much had a stand up or a scrum every day. So, the first meeting or call of the day, 10, 15 minutes. What are you doing? What is everyone doing? This is in obviously the immediate team, um, but there is definitely calls with other departments or on a bigger project wide call for some things when you're doing reviews or play tests. Um, I think environment artists definitely work the closest with your immediate project manager or art director, whatever. Other environment artists, but I'd say we also work really still close with your TAs, definitely your LDs, your level designs, and I'd argue somewhat close with your audio team. You might have some blueprints that have got like certain things in them, and it's just a good heads up to say, hey, I've done this. Do you want to add an audio pass, right? Add some ambient or add some sounds into this blueprint just to tie the art together with the sounds, and then obviously TA will have a pass in that blueprint to make sure that's as optimized as well. So I think that kind of stuff is quite an immediate close circle. Um, but yeah, there's definitely communication across multiple teams. There's been other projects where it's been maybe less intimate or less close circle, but there was still daily or weekly like reviews, and you'll see everyone's work and it looks awesome, and it's just nice to kind of have that exposure and transparency across other departments. Some things will have that knock-on effect where, oh, I didn't realise that they were doing that. That's kind of cool. And then you might be a little bit more autonomous. And then when you next do something, you might be like, okay, maybe I don't need to share that, or it's not urgent. But because you've seen someone do something that's very similar, you could be like, oh, this has been done by the way. They might have some spare time, spare capacity, and they might be able to take a look on that thing that they could have done, in 2 weeks' time. But again, if they've got time now because you realise that they've been doing something similar or they've been doing certain passes on things, then yeah, um, pretty important.
Yeah, I suppose this is where the emphasis on being like a nice, a friendly and approachable person to work with, because you end up working in a massive team with all these different outlets. Listen, Josh, that was the only questions I had for you. So thanks so much for taking part in this. Any final thoughts before we wrap up, or
No,
okay, all right,
none.
great, thank you very much.